Today I want to talk a little bit about waste management. Waste management. And so once again, I'm going to talk a little bit coming out of the book of Daniel, chapter 1. I want to really deal with the issue of stinking thinking. Stinking thinking. Daniel chapter 1, starting in verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then, verse 3, the king commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths that were without blemish, of good appearance and of skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for, listen to this, 3 years. And at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. To Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. To Mishael he called Meshach. And to Azariah he called Abednego. Verse 8. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. I want you to underline that. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs, verse 10, said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to him, the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, verse 12, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetable to eat, water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food also be observed by you, and to deal with your servant according to what you see. So he listened to them in that matter, and he tested them for 10 days. Verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, it was seen that they were in better appearance and fatter in the flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine that they were to drink, and he gave them vegetables. Your brain is 3 pounds. It weighs 3 pounds. And yet, it processes 70,000 thoughts each day. That little 3-pound brain of yours has the ability to process 70,000 thoughts each day using 1 billion neurons that connect to more than 500 trillion points through synapses that are wired in your brain. And they travel at 300 miles per hour. That's pretty quick. You just had a thought. Yes, you did. It traveled in 300 miles per hour from your wherever that brain to wherever it was that you were thinking, and right back to that neural synapse. You had a quick thought. 70,000 thoughts throughout the day. The problem for many of us is that we deal with stinking thinking. According to a research conducted by the National Science Foundation, around 80% of your thoughts, 80% of your thoughts are negative. That's according to a recent research, a post-COVID. Most people now deal with so much negative thinking. 1 in 5 of your thoughts are negative right now. Think about that for just a moment. And today I'm going to challenge you to consider how much waste, how much energy is wasted, how much of your space, of what goes on right here in your brain, how much are you wasting how much waste are you accumulating in your life? How much wasted thinking, how much negative, stinking thinking are you accumulating in your life? See, because the problem with stinking thinking is that it informs your worldview. The problem with negative thinking, what you think, is going to inform how you view the entire world, how you view how you're going to make decisions in this world. A worldview is a collection of attitudes, values, stories, and expectations about the world around us, which inform our every thought and our every action. Your worldview provides you with some basic interpretive tools in order to interpret the circumstances that you're going through. And so if you have a negative view of everything that's going on, how are you going to look at that circumstance from a long-term perspective? You're going to look at it negatively. Behind every thought is a narrative. Behind every thought, there is a story that you believe about yourself, about the world that you live in, and even about your God. Can I tell you, the worldview, any worldview, actually answers three basic questions. It answers, where did we come from? Number two, what is wrong with this world? And number three, what can we do to fix this crazy world? That's what a worldview does. A worldview says, okay, I understand, I came from somewhere, and if I came from somewhere, then, man, this world is really messed up. And why is it messed up? And then how am I supposed to be involved in this crazy, messed up world? So we're confronted, listen, you and I are confronted with a hodgepodge of all kinds of worldviews. Some of us have mixed up worldviews. We've mixed this with what we learned when we were a kid, with what I learned from when I was in VBS, with what I learned in college, with what I learned in high school, and so we have this hodgepodge of worldviews. But can I tell you the most common worldview that is given today in our world today, the most common worldview in our culture is to believe that we came as a result of some cosmic accident. That's the most common worldview, that some random atoms collided together in the Big Bang of cosmic slime, resulting in an accidental evolution of mankind. That is some crazy thinking. But it's the predominant thought of the day. It's the predominant thought that, hey, somehow all of these random things took place. And if we believe that life is a cosmic accident, then you live by the assumption, right? If it's just an accident, then I live by the assumption that I need to produce something of value in order to have value. I got to produce something in order for me to be someone. I got to do something in order for me to be someone. But you might be saying, Pastor, I don't believe that. And yet you set your life up as if you don't produce something, then you have no value to add. And some of you have really, you've given into this lie that, well, you just got to work harder, work smarter, do more. And so you set up your life in the same worldview that you say, well, I really don't believe it, but I'm living like it, like I do believe it. You act as if my life is only meaningful if I accumulate wealth. You act like your life is only meaningful if you've accumulated the toys. You act like your life is only meaningful if I get that degree. I live like my life is only meaningful if I marry that person, if I have that child, or if I do this, if I get this accolade, if someone will see me rise up, then I'll have value. I'll have given some value to this world, and so my life will have value in the thing that I do. And what we've wind up seeing is that we move away from a reliance on the reality that there is a cosmic designer of all things. And that cosmic designer has made a provision in a way that is perfectly balanced so that we can understand the world that we live in is not about what we can accomplish, but it's about who we're living with, who is with us. That the God of the universe has ordained my every step. That the God of the universe has always been by my side. That the God of the universe has designed me in his likeness and in his image. And he has a perfect plan, irrespective of our ability to grasp the enormity of it all. I love what Rebecca Solnit writes. She says, given a choice between their worldview and the facts, it's always interesting how many people toss out the facts. They toss out the facts. They'll say, well, no, this is just what I believe. Forget the facts. This is just what I believe. Why? Why? Because there is a spiritual force at work looking to alienate you from God. There is a spiritual force. There is an enemy of your soul that is looking to alienate you from God. You say, Pastor, where does that say that? Revelation chapter 17. I'm glad you asked. Revelation chapter 17, starting in verse 3. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names. And it had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and in scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a cup full of abomination and the impurities of her sexual immorality. It was all about what she got. How? Look, this is what you can accumulate. This is your identity, right? Verse 5, look at it. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery. It said, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman, look at this, verse 6, drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled greatly. Understand, I want you to understand something. When the Bible talks about Babylon, now we understand Babylon was a kingdom. It was a kingdom in the New Testament. It was a kingdom that rose and fall. But when we talk about Babylon and what Daniel writes prophetically about the rise and the fall of Babylon is not about the kingdom. It's about the system of that kingdom. And so we see Babylon repeated all throughout Scripture, and it's really talking about the system of Babylon. The devil, the enemy, has a system in place on trying to alienate the people of God from the God who created them. And he wants to take away the saints from God. He is trying to sever that relationship. Yes, it was a place in history, but it really was a metaphor of that system that caused them to be separated. The New Testament uses a different word. Oftentimes, it will still refer to Babylon. You see that in Revelation. It'll use the word the world, or the proper Greek is the cosmos. And it's still about the system of the world, the way that the world operates. And the way that the world operates, the enemy of our soul is constantly manipulating us to try to sever that relationship that God wants to have with you. How does it accomplish that? Well, Daniel gives us a good picture in Daniel chapter 1 of how that system is accomplished. You notice the first thing in verse 2. The first thing that they do is that they take away all of the treasures from the house of God, and they bring it to the land of Shinar, and they put it in the house of their God. They wanted to separate the people from the worship of God. They said, hey, if we will take away all the things that bring them to a recognition, a remembrance of what God has done for them and how God has been there for them, then, hey, we can sever that relationship with God. See, that's what he does. He plunders the temple. The first thing that the Babylonians did was to steal the communion with God, the connection with God. Can I tell you, the enemy still uses the same tactic today. That Babylon system is still at work today. See, the world is constantly, the devil, the God of this world is constantly trying to get you to stop worshiping God. And he will put all kinds of stuff to cause you to be disconnected from God. As a system, listen to this. I'll put that slide up. As a system, Babylon wants to disconnect, to distort, to distract, and to delete your identity. It wants to, let me say that again, disconnect, distort, distract, and delete your identity. How does it do that? Look at verse 3. Verse 3, it says that they took all of the young men from their homes and they brought them to the place, to the palace. And it says that they come and they're there and they're disconnected from their families. They're disconnected from the place of worship. And they're brought into this place of alienation from everyone else. And they're taught for 3 years on only the things of Babylon, on only the things of the Chaldeans. Turn to your neighbor and says, you have to stay, tell him you have to stay connected. Tell her to your neighbor, say, you got to stay connected. You got to stay connected. Can I tell you, there are so many things that are trying to disconnect you from the things of God. And you have got to stay connected. You have got to stay with the people of God. Once again, I said it's not about coming here on a Sunday morning and having theater religion. It's about you continuing to connect with other believers and saying, hey, you know what? How can we allow the Spirit of God and the gifts of the Spirit to be in operation in our lives, not just on Sunday morning, but on every other day of the week? Can I tell you, there's only so much of the gifts of the Spirit that can be made manifest on a Sunday morning. I know I've had people say, well, Pastor, we need to have this on a Sunday morning and this on a Sunday morning. And I said, no. You need to have that in your prayer closet with 5 other people. There's only so much we can do in a corporate gathering. You know where the greatest ministry happens is when iron sharpens iron, one with another person. You're sitting at each other's tables and you're praying with each other and you're lifting each other up. And so I want to encourage you to get connected to a small group. Because the enemy would have nothing more than to have you alienated, separated from other people. Listen, this is exactly what we saw 3 years ago. And yet we still haven't learned our lesson, have we? We still live alienated lives, separated lives. And the Bible has called us to be connected. Apart from me, you can do nothing, Jesus says. The next thing he tries to do is he tries to distort. Look what he does. He takes them into that place, these young men. And what does it say? It says that he taught them for 3 years in the ways of the Chaldeans. And so there's this information overload, constant information. And we live in a day and age where there is so much information. There is a Wikipedia to the Wikipedia to the Wikipedia. Now, if you want to fact check what the fact checkers said that they were going to fact check when there was not a fact, then you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's true. Like there is so much information that doesn't even line up with one another. And so we're sitting here, we're like, okay, I don't know what's right and what's true and because we have so much information. This is the tactic of the enemy. He wants to overload you with information that is useless, that will distort your reality. It will distort what you believe to be true. It distorts your ability to know what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false, what is male and what is female. Come on. Seriously, there is such a distortion of truth in our culture. That's the tactic he uses. And then when you start questioning the distortion of the truth, what's the next thing he does? Verse 5, he pushes food in front of them. Oh, you're going to get the king's portion. Man, you're just going to live a lavish life. I'm going to give you everything you ever wanted. Man, you're going to eat, you're going to drink, you're going to be merry, you're going to have fun. This is going to be a great time. We're going to resource you. One day you get to stand in front of the king. Who aren't you so special? So the enemy will then begin to distract us by trying to cause us to live a life of excess. And then when he finally gets down to it, what he'll try to do is to delete your identity. Look what it says, verse 6. Watch this, verse 6. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, the tribe of Judah, and the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Didn't they already have names? Yeah. Yeah. But he gave them names. He said, Daniel he shall call Belteshazzar. Look at this, look at this. Let me give you a quick understanding of this, of how the enemy tries to distort this. Daniel means God is my judge. Belteshazzar means the God of Babylon will protect you. Hananiah means God is gracious. Shadrach means I am fearful of the God of Babylon. Mishael means who is like God. Meshach means I am of little account. I am nobody. Azariah means God is my helper. Abednego means I am a slave of the God of Babylon. See, this is what the enemy tries to do. He tries to change your perspective. He tries to change your identity. He causes you to question who you are. Listen, we live in a world where identity is constantly at the forefront. I don't know what I identify as. Well, I'm an anxious person. I'm just anxious Annie. Call me anxious Annie. That's my name. I'm just anxious about everything. Listen, I'm not trying to belittle the fact that you may be dealing with anxiety. Here's what the problem is if we start to identify us by the thing that we're dealing with, now we're saying, oh, wait, God doesn't have a place to now bring redemption in my life. Is that person dealing with anxiety? Yeah. Do they need some help? Absolutely. But they don't need to wallow in that identity anymore. They don't need to take on what the enemy has lied to them about. There is a spiritual force that seeks, listen, and it has been seeking and coming after our youth to make you identify with anything and anyone primarily before you identify with the image of God inside of you. That is what the enemy tries to do. He tries to make you identify with whatever it is that you're dealing. I'm not belittling what you're dealing with. I'm telling you that there is a God who wants to address what you're dealing with. He knows your hurt. He knows your need. And he has given his life on the cross of Calvary to bring redemption into your life, to bring wholeness into your life, to bring healing into your life. He doesn't want you to wallow in that. He doesn't want you. He wants you to understand who you were created to be. And what were you created to be? You were created to be in the image of God. In the image of God, he created. Listen, that is called the Imago Dei. It is in the very beginning, the very Genesis chapter 1. In the image of God, we were created, and we were created in the image of God. You and I were created in his likeness and in his image. And that is the foremost important thing that we need to understand. Who made me? Where did I come from? How am I in this messed up world? What is he doing to make things right? Right? He is continuing to make me an image bearer. Problem for so many of us is that we can't identify with that. And so sometimes we identify with what we're passionate about. Some of us were like, "Oh, Pastor, I don't need to go to see a counselor. I'm good. I'm good. I work 80 hours a week. My career is taken off. Yeah, my identity is found in what I do." And some of you have been so passionate about, listen, I'm not saying that having a career is a bad thing. I'm saying be careful that your identity doesn't get wrapped up in what you've done, what you're trying to accomplish, that you move away from the identity that God has placed inside of you, and that's his image being born in your life. So some of you are passionate about your career. You say, well, this is what I'm passionate about. This is who I am. And what happens when you can't do that anymore? What happens when that job is eliminated? What happens when that field is no longer a field that is in demand? If you've wrapped up your identity in your career, can I tell you, you're only going to walk into a place where you're going to be broken again. Some of you say, well, my identity is wrapped up. And listen, in my talent, Pastor, nobody can ever take my talent away from me. Right? I'm talented and gifted in this, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And so this is who I am. And so we lean so hard on our talent only to find that it doesn't bring the fulfillment that we thought it could bring. Some of you, you're passionate about your education. And when you get that degree or when you get that certification, it's not enough at the end. And so you go out and, well, I got to do this. I got to have multiple degrees because this degree wasn't enough and this career track isn't right. And so you're constantly changing your educational goals because it doesn't bring you fulfillment, because it doesn't address the underlying issue of your identity. Some of you have been dealing with that, with status. Like status, some of you have been dealing with it with a hobby. You say, well, Pastor, mine's not as sinister. Those things, yeah, okay, I understand. But I'm just a fisherman. I like to fish. And God, as a matter of fact, didn't Jesus pull a bunch of fishermen to be his disciples? So Sunday I'm going to be fishing because that's where I'm supposed to be at. Because I'm a fisherman. And Jesus loved fishermen. And once again, we disconnect from the identity that God has primarily called us to because we now find our identity in the hobby that we are chasing after. Why? There is a spiritual element behind it that doesn't care which passion you choose as long as that passion isn't living for God. Let me say that again. The spiritual force of darkness doesn't care what passion you choose. As a matter of fact, it will throw all kinds of passions after you. It doesn't care what passion you choose as long as you are not living for God. See, Babylon gets drunk on the blood of the saints. That's what it says right there in Revelation chapter 17. Babylon got drunk on the blood. It craved the severing of the communication between the saints and God. That's what the devil wants. He wants to sever your relationship with God, stealing you from the hands of God and delivering you into destruction. Who am I is not found in what I do or what I produce. It's not found independent of God. It is found when I understand what God has called me to, when I understand whose I am and what he has done for my life. It's so interesting. It's so interesting that in the 80 years that Daniel is in captivity, 60 times we see his name in the book of Daniel. We see it 60 times. Not once does he identify with the name of Belteshazzar. Not once. The only time it's written was when the eunuch says, oh, that's going to be your name. And Daniel's like, no. You don't understand. That is, you may want to call me that, but you better call me Daniel because Daniel is who I am, and that is who I am. God has made me. As a matter of fact, I love this. Verse 8, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. He resolved. It was a thought. It was a change. It was a perspective. It was a world view that he had. Listen, it doesn't matter what the world says about me. I know whose I am. In that entire account, he's always referred to as Daniel. Daniel never identifies with the name that is given to him. He is rooted in his identity that is founded in his belief in his God. Who I am is rooted in the story that God has written, not in a narrative that the world tries to give me. Listen, young person, you need to understand this today. The world will try to throw a narrative at you, but your identity is rooted in what God has said about you. That you are his daughter. You are his son. You were created in his likeness. He loves you. He loved you so much that even while you were still sinning, when you were still messing up, he gave his only begotten son to die on the cross that you might have life and life everlasting. Daniel's worldview is that there was a divine creator. There was a divine creator, and that life is not ultimately about you or your comfort or your self-realization. Life is about God, and only he can give you the illumination that you need. He has a distinct purpose in all the things that he creates. And he created you with that purpose to be the image bearer of God. I've heard people ask me, Pastor, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know why I'm still here to live for. And this is what I want to tell you, and I want to remind you, you are here today because you are called to be the image bearer of Christ to your children, to your grandchildren, to your great-grandchildren, that you can reflect, that they can see Jesus inside of you through the decisions that you've made in your life. We carry the image of God, which means that we have purpose and that you are sacred. You are sacred, not because of what you produce, but because of God's great purpose in you. I need you to understand that today. See, Daniel writes prophetically of the one who is to come, who would then clean up our house. He would provide stability to deal with the junk that we've been accumulating in our lawn. The junk that we've been accumulating in the lawn of our minds. The stuff that we've been believing about ourselves in our heart. And this is what Christ did. He came to rescue humanity. God himself in flesh, who would die as a substitute for you, to wash you and cleanse you, and then would rise again and give you everlasting life. See, that is the foundation of our faith. And then Christ would deal with all of our failings and expose the fallen nature that we try to put a barrier between us and God with. And Jesus says, "No, I'm going to knock down that wall. I'm going to expose your sin for what it is." But he doesn't do it with this, look at you. He does it with love. Listen, he knocks down that wall, says, "Come to me. I have something better for you. I have a new life that you can live in." And then he doesn't just leave us with that. He actually gives us, he says, "I got to leave so that I can give you the Holy Spirit that will indwell inside of you so that now you can have the power to overcome the sin that you've been dealing with." See, the last 3 sermons, right there. God wants you to start a smart home. He wants you to have a smart home because he wants you to renew your mind by carting off all that junk thinking. The story that you believe, listen, is the launching pad for your healthy living. So let's think about why would Daniel, confronted with all this food, resist eating this, right? He's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do what God has called me to do." And some people will say, a lot of theologians will say that it was because the food was offered up to idols. But I don't believe that. I believe that's part of it. Yes, he did. The food was offered up to idols, but the vegetables were also offered up to the idols. The water was poured out as a drink offering to those same idols. So it wasn't about the meat. It was those were just, that was important part of that element. But I think it's even more important for us to understand and have a better understanding of why Daniel decided not to partake of that table. And it's in this understanding that excess living will eventually numb your sensitivity to God. Can you put that slide up? Excess living will eventually numb your sensitivity to God. Think about the implications of that. If you're excess living or overindulgence in comfort, it will eventually numb your ability to hear from God, to connect with God. We speak about comfort as if it's our right. Like, I have the right to have 255 channels on my TV. I have the right. I have a right to be able to have my dopamine fixes every day. I have the right to be able to have the internet so I can get all the information that's out there. Think about the last 3 years. Where have you been running for comfort? Think about the last 3 years. Has it been Instagram? TikTok? Has it been watching sports? Binge watching Disney Plus? Binge watching Hallmark Channel? We have been so obsessed with home decor, obsessed with video games, obsessed over football stats. And yet when it comes to the spiritual life, the eternal things, when it comes to peace in your soul, truth that can sustain you, it's so small on the priority scale compared to the other things that a week from now will mean nothing. Think about that. our constant consumption numbs our hearts towards God. See, Paul addresses this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. He says, now this I say, I testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They were darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God. Listen, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of their heart. They became callous when? Have given themselves up to sensuality, greed to practice every kind of impurity. Paul says that having lost the sensitivity to the things of God, they chased after things that would provide for their flesh. And did it bring them any joy? Did it bring him any more joy? No, it did not. As a matter of fact, that's what we've learned over the last 3 years. Some of us have been alienated, kept ourselves away from all other people. And yet we've become more depressed, more anxious, more angry, more irrational, more alone, more obsessed, more offended, more narrow-minded than ever before. I'm not getting a whole lot of amens on this. That's okay. Amen. Excess living isn't leading to joy, it's leading to death. And I wonder if you've lost some sensitivity to God today. Can I give you a statistic? The average person in the U.S. in 2022 spent 151 minutes on social media per day. 151 minutes. Prior to COVID, people spent 144 minutes, which is still a lot. But the number keeps going up. More and more time is dedicated to social media. We look at it and we say, oh, look. They have a new dog. Wow, isn't that cute? Oh, look at that puppy. Oh, look at what they have for breakfast. Man, I wish I had that breakfast. Or we say, oh, look at where they're going on vacation. 2 hours and 31 minutes a day. 2 hours and 31 minutes a day is spent on social media. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Can I tell you what you're looking for? Can I tell you what our culture is looking for? They're looking to get connected. The problem is that form of connection does not take place there. What winds up happening is that we lose our clarity becomes more distorted, and in turn we wind up getting more distracted. Babylon is deleting our sense of self. And the story of God is getting smaller and smaller, and the story of Babylon is overtaking our narrative of life. But Daniel gives us a glimpse of how to live in Babylon without having Babylon live in us. And what he actually talks about and what he says happens is about limiting what we expose to. Someone here has been rejected some sacred limits in your life. You've rejected limits on your Sabbath, your day of rest. When it comes to your day of rest, you're like, oh, wait, I can do this, I can do that. And you never actually take a day of rest. Some of you have rejected sacred limits on your sexual purity. You say, well, whatever goes, goes. Some of you have rejected some sacred limits on the accumulation of stuff. You're chasing after stuff and stuff and stuff, and you become less and less generous, and your heart has become bittered and hard because of it. And if you will understand living in limits, listen, you will flourish. Look what he says, and I'm going to close with this, verse 15. I'm going to ask our worship team to make their way up here. At the end of the 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in the flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the stewards took away their food and the wine that they were to drink, and he gave them vegetables. Verse 20, look at this. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. They set some limits for themselves, and God expanded them. Listen, God's not looking to rob you. He is looking to make you healthier in every area of your life. But you need to disconnect to the story of Babylon and connect to the story of God. What if you turned off your social media and your TV off for a week? And I know this is hard. This is hard for me. I understand. I'm going to do it. I'm pledging to do it myself this month. 1 week, 7 days. What if you did that for 7 days? What can I promise you if you disengage from social media for a week, or you stop those Netflix binges, or stop playing video games for 1 week? I can promise you that you will connect to a greater purpose. You will connect to greater freedom. You will connect to greater clarity. Some of you need here to ask God, God, what do I need to limit in my life? Consider how much stuff, how much trash, how much wasteful extras you will have accumulated in your thought process. See, Daniel was strong not because of the food that he ate, but because of what he believed. His faith made him stronger. As he created limits for himself, he strengthened himself, and with the truth that God had never left him, God had never abandoned him, God had always been by his side. He stood positive because he had a worldview that said, my God is my strength and my portion, my ever-present help in the times of my struggle. He cast off every evil thought. He did some mental waste management. Will you commit to some mental waste management this week to cast off distorted truth and limit your perspective, limit your consumption, to increase your perspective on what God wants to do in and through your life? Then stand with me and give God permission today to edit your story by calling out to the one who has been faithful from the very beginning. He has been faithful then, he is faithful now. Sing it to him.